California, that was a great exchange. The other gentleman from California, Mr. Rohrabacher, is
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It's been a very interesting discussion, and let me know I'm not an engineer, so some of the things I'm still trying to come to grips with of how we are accomplishing the various output that based on the input and what's in between there. I'm not really sure about some of the engineering, but the basic motive that we have, supposedly, or the basic motive behind much of what's going on about CO2 is based on the theory that CO2 is a major factor in causing our planet to get hotter and hotter. I don't happen to agree with that. I've talked to a lot of scientists who believe that premise is not correct, that ice cores, looking back at the ice cores from ancient times to now, actually has the planet getting hotter, and then there's more CO2 being created. I'm not going to ask you what your beliefs are on CO2 making the planet hotter. Let's just accept that today, the discussion today is based on, okay, there's CO2 that's being produced. Can we do something that is beneficial to mankind, even if you do not believe that CO2 is causing the planet to get hotter? And that discussion, I think, is very important for all of us to make, and we're very happy to have you here to help direct that discussion. In my own area in Orange County, we have a company called New Light Technologies. Are you aware of this company? I'm very proud of these young men who were surfers and went off to Princeton and got educated and realized that there was a potential for getting something out of the air, straight out of the air, that would be of value. And they have just opened up their first $50 million production site after spending years of perfecting it. And let me just note for the record here, it's New Light Technologies, and they are taking carbon dioxide and methane emissions right out of the air and producing high quality plastic that is actually at a lower cost than the current method of producing plastic, and the plastic that they are producing has biodegradable properties that make it even more important, because whales that are eating plastic bags, we know that's bad. We know in fish, another ingestion of plastic is actually harmful for the environment. These kids are taking that CO2 out of the air and the methane out of the air and producing things that are cheaper and better. And so I think that's a formula for progress. And so whatever we do, we need to make sure that actually there is not just the benefit of keeping the planet from warming, but instead other benefits that go with that. Now I'd like to talk about that. I'd like to ask about whether or not, when we're talking about the Colorado, are the Wyoming projects and that are going on, or we have, well, let me talk about the scrubbers first and all of what you presented for us, Dr. Brun, was very complicated. And again, I was trying to get a non-engineer to understand this. In the end, are you coming up with a product that actually is going to be cost-effective, or is this going to be an enormous cost?
No, all the models are predicting that it's cost-effective. And what's important here is that this is not done in a vacuum. We are working with industry. We're working with all the major power players in the United States and companies like General Electric and others that are investing significantly of their own money. So they're not just taking DOE money to develop this technology, they're investing their own money. And so they're clearly seeing commercial viability in that technology, otherwise they wouldn't be pursuing it.
So this is actually would be economically viable in and of itself?
That is the aim.
Okay.
Yes.
In Dr. Aines, in your prepared statement, you mentioned the potential growth for using carbon for manufacturing in industry. And with both carbon dioxide and natural gas will be the main inputs for industry. When you think about natural gas and both carbon dioxide and natural gas being used as inputs for this, so why do we need to then have tax benefits and R&D funding for all fossil fuels if indeed we're just talking about the natural gas and carbon dioxide?
I can't answer that question in detail. I look to the future and I see that industry is very interested in using natural gas because of the simplicity and the cleanliness, but mostly the simplicity. And it's lower cost for them, and so that is where the direction that a lot of industrial movers are going.
Well, when it comes to CO2, and you know, I drove across the country with my family a year ago, and one thing that was interesting for my kids was to see all of these fields that were covered with plastic and machines pumping something into that plastic with the different plants like tomatoes, et cetera. And my kids were very surprised to find out that they were pumping CO2 into these big coverings of agricultural products. Is the end situation there, we're utilizing CO2 for something that's positive. We get more food out of it. Is that so? Isn't this not an example? Is there more examples like this that we could have that we're using CO2 that will, in a way, benefit, like our friends are making plastic out of it? Are we going to see more of this? And maybe you have some examples specifically of how CO2 will be used to have other uses that are beneficial?
That's a great example. And another example that I would point to is the addition of carbon dioxide to cement and concrete, which I know of about 20 companies that are pursuing this. And the major advantage there is it makes the concrete stronger. And so you can use less of it, you can have a more efficient structure, and it's a terrific combination of having a better product and using the CO2 that we want to keep out of the air.
So we don't have to really agree on whether or not global warming is caused by CO2 to be very interested in this whole concept of science research and expanding the use of CO2 in a positive way.
You don't. You just have to agree and yield back.
Thank you.
Okay.